God rest him wherever he is. I know that his wife is working out some sort of an agreement now with the University of Texas.
For decades, Antarctica has been presented to the world as a pristine, frozen wasteland, a continent of harsh winds, shifting glaciers, and international scientific cooperation strictly regulated by peaceful treaties. But behind the veil of academic research and environmental preservation lies a tightly guarded secrets engine that multiple world governments have spent over 70 years protecting. At 81 years old, Emmy Award-winning investigative journalist Linda Moulton Howe has decided that the time for secrecy is over, declaring that before she dies, she must tell the truth about what is buried beneath the southern ice. The witnesses who trusted her with the most dangerous secrets of their careers are passing away, and if this knowledge is not shared with the public, a staggering truth about human history risks being lost forever. The journey into this hidden history truly began to unravel for Linda in 1998, when she received a late-night phone call from a retired U.S. Navy flight engineer whose health was rapidly failing. Knowing his time on Earth was drawing to a close, he felt an overwhelming burden to break the non-disclosure agreements he had signed nearly 2 decades prior. He recounted an extraordinary event from 1982, during a routine supply run from McMurdo Station to a remote research camp deep in the frozen interior of the Antarctic continent. An unexpected mechanical malfunction forced his crew to make an emergency landing on an isolated wind-swept ridge, a desolate place where temperatures were low enough to burn exposed skin in seconds. While the crew scrambled to repair the aircraft fuselage against the hammering winds, the flight engineer cast his eyes across the vast, white horizon and noticed something that defied all geological logic. Protruding through the ancient ice sheet on a distant rise were massive, symmetrical shapes that broke the landscape with stark geometric precision. Intrigued and unsettled, he walked closer, discovering what appeared to be the apex of a colossal angular structure partially exposed by centuries of wind erosion. The material was neither ice nor natural rock. It was an incredibly dark, solid, and highly manufactured substance that looked utterly alien to the surrounding environment. Before he could investigate further, his radio crackled with urgent, panicked orders from command, instructing the crew to abort any observation and return to McMurdo Station immediately. Upon landing, intelligence officers were already waiting on the tarmac to separate the crew, confiscate their flight logs, subject them to intense individual debriefings, and force them to sign strict security papers under the absolute directive that this event never happened. Linda Moulton Howe did not build her legendary reputation on internet rumors or unverified claims. She is a trained, meticulous investigative journalist who spent over 4 decades demanding documented evidence, verifying military credentials, and cross-referencing official records. When this flight engineer contacted her, she spent hours conducting grueling interviews, verifying his naval service record, confirming his flight paths, and cross-referencing the specific coordinates and names of the crew members involved. Everything checked out perfectly, but as an experienced reporter, she knew that a single witness statement, no matter how compelling, was not enough to challenge the official global narrative. She chose to file his testimony away in her secure archives, keeping his identity protected, and decided to wait, completely unaware that this single phone call was merely the first piece of an enormous, terrifying puzzle. Over the next 25 years, an uncanny pattern began to emerge as more individuals from completely different sectors of the military, scientific communities, and government defense contractors began contacting her independently. These individuals had never met, were stationed at entirely different bases across different decades, and had no knowledge of each other's existence. Yet they were all describing pieces of the exact same impossible reality. A prominent geophysicist who had conducted advanced ice-penetrating radar surveys across the continent sat across from Linda in a state of visible distress, whispering how his equipment had detected massive, geometrically regular subterranean voids deep within the ice sheet. When he flagged the anomalous data to his superiors, his supervisor's face drained of color. Within hours, the entire dataset was classified under national security protocols, and his research team was permanently reassigned to different corners of the globe. The testimonies continued to mount, each one adding a new layer of physical detail to the hidden Antarctic infrastructure. a veteran from a Navy construction battalion, popularly known as the Seabees, described being deployed to an unmapped, highly classified excavation site located hundreds of miles away from any recognized scientific outpost. There were no climate scientists or ice core drillers present. Instead, his unit was ordered to drill straight down into the ancient ice matrix until they reached the bottom of a massive shaft. At the terminal depth, the construction worker stared in absolute disbelief at smooth, metallic walls that featured flawless, manufactured surfaces and deliberate architectural curves that could never be produced by natural geological forces. He returned to the surface with a deep sense of dread, realizing that someone had engineered an immense complex beneath the ice long before modern humanity ever arrived on the continent. Further validation came from international sources, including a researcher stationed at Argentina's Esperanza base, who quietly confessed to Linda that deep ice core drilling operations occasionally extracted anomalous artifacts that were geologically dated to be over 12,000 years old. Without fail, every time an artifact was brought to light, mysterious military personnel would arrive via unmarked transport to immediately confiscate the physical samples, erase the data logs, and ensure that no academic papers were ever published. Parallel to these ground discoveries, a seasoned military pilot described flying logistical missions across Antarctica, while navigating around an enormous, strictly enforced no-fly zone that did not exist on any public aviation charts. When he questioned his commanding officer about the nature of the restricted airspace, he was met with a chillingly brief response. It was a highly sensitive research area, and he was to stop asking questions if he valued his career. The turning point that completely transformed Linda's long-term investigation occurred in 2016, when she was contacted by a retired NORAD officer who possessed some of the highest security clearances in the defense infrastructure. Linda would later describe him as the single most credible and knowledgeable source she had ever interviewed in her entire journalistic career. He had been intimately involved in a highly classified, off-the-books Antarctic operation in the early 2000s, and his high-level briefings allowed him to view the entire covert landscape from an administrative perspective. When he began laying out the classified data, every disparate testimony, hidden coordinate, and fragmented account that Linda had collected over the previous 2 decades instantly clicked together like the intricate gears of a massive hidden machine. According to this high-level NORAD source, the anomalies buried beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet are not small outposts or localized ruins. They are an extensive, highly advanced urban complex consisting of multiple massive structures of artificial origin. The internal military data revealed that these structures are incredibly ancient, significantly predating the last ice age, which means they were constructed during a geographical epoch when Antarctica was a lush, green, temperate continent filled with flowing rivers and dense forests. This places the creation of the complex well over 12,000 years ago, thousands of years before the rise of Sumer, thousands of years before the first Egyptian dynasty, and long before the timeline of any civilization currently recognized by mainstream history textbooks. The historical timeline provided by the NORAD officer indicated that these anomalies were first discovered by modern governments in the 1940s during Operation High Jump, the massive 1946 to 1947 naval expedition led by famed polar explorer Admiral Richard E. Byrd. While the public was told that the expedition was a routine exercise to establish research bases and train military personnel for extreme polar conditions, the classified reality was an intense search triggered by early seismic surveys that had detected deep, unexplained structural anomalies beneath the ice. For over 7 decades following that expedition, the United States, Russia, and more recently China have been engaged in a highly coordinated, top-secret recovery operation across the continent, completely separated from the public-facing scientific endeavors governed by the International Antarctic Treaty. These covert operations are not focused on weather patterns or penguin migrations. They are full-scale archaeological excavations and technological retrieval projects designed to harvest highly advanced ancient technology. The source explained that while some areas of this subterranean city are accessed through deep drilling operations disguised as climate research, other sectors are reachable through vast networks of natural ice caves created by the geothermal heat of the shifting glaciers. Most remarkably, The officer revealed to Linda that some of the highly sophisticated technology recovered from these prehistoric structures is still functional, operating on physical principles that current human science cannot fully comprehend. When Linda demanded proof, the officer went beyond mere words, providing highly specific geographical coordinates, redacted internal military documents detailing project designations, and a list of active personnel involved in the operations whom she could independently verify. The physical reality of what it is like to stand inside these structures was vividly illustrated by a terminally ill defense contractor who spoke to Linda in 2003 after receiving a terminal cancer diagnosis. He described the agonizingly slow descent on an open equipment platform lowered over a mile down into a heavily secured ice shaft. As the natural daylight vanished above him into a pinprick of light, the featureless, blue-veined walls of natural ice suddenly gave way to an entirely different architectural environment. The air quality shifted dramatically, the extreme cold stabilized, and the acoustics became hollow as he stepped off the platform into a colossal subterranean cavity. Illuminated by the team's high-powered headlamps, the walls revealed intricate geometric patterns, strange symbols, and a perfectly framed, manufactured doorway leading deeper into the subterranean complex. An entrance his team was strictly forbidden from entering due to their lack of specialized security clearances. As Linda continued to pull on these threads, additional whistleblowers stepped forward to reveal how the global intelligence apparatus maintains the illusion of an empty, frozen continent. A satellite imagery analyst confessed that he was ordered to digitally scrub specific Antarctic coordinates from public mapping databases, replacing high-resolution images of rectilinear, engineered formations with blurred, low-resolution textures of generic ice fields. A materials scientist described analyzing metallic alloys recovered from the southern continent that exhibited strength-to-weight ratios and corrosion resistance completely off the charts, featuring manufacturing signatures that modern industrial factories are entirely incapable of replicating. Furthermore, logistics coordinators for polar research programs discovered anomalous equipment manifests routed through hidden Department of Defense channels, showing that industrial excavation tools and sealed transport containers were being moved under armed military escort completely outside the scope of scientific oversight. By the year 2020, Linda Moulton Howe found herself holding an unprecedented archive of over 15 highly credible testimonies, verified coordinates, and official military documentation, pointing to the greatest historical cover-up of the modern era. But then, a quiet tragedy began to unfold. Her sources began to die one by one. The original Navy flight engineer passed away in 2019, followed by the crucial NORAD officer in 2022, while others entered hospice care or succumbed to fading memories. Now in her 80s, Linda experienced a moment of profound, brutal clarity. She was rapidly becoming the last living person who held all of these testimonies together, the final thread connecting the brave whistleblowers to the rest of humanity. Realizing that 25 years of intense, dangerous investigative work would vanish into oblivion if she remained silent, she chose to honor her promises to these men. In late 2023 and early 2024, Linda began assembling and releasing portions of her comprehensive Antarctic report through her platform, earthfiles.com, exposing specific coordinates, anonymized transcripts, and satellite data to the public while issuing a direct challenge to independent researchers, satellite analysts, and international scientists to look at the data themselves. The response from every single implicated world government was an absolute deafening silence. There were no official denials, no public corrections, no legal threats, and no defamation lawsuits. A response that Linda notes is the loudest confirmation her investigation could ever receive. Today, amateur satellite analysts and independent researchers continue to examine her coordinates, discovering anomalous structures and finding their public data requests denied under the sweeping guise of national security. The legacy of Linda Moulton Howe's investigation stands as a monumental disruption to the linear narrative of human progress, leaving the world to confront a staggering final question. If multiple global superpowers have spent nearly a century hiding an advanced pre-ice age civilization beneath the southern ice, what else are they keeping in the shadows? And what happens to our understanding of reality when the ice finally fails to hide the truth.